Reimagining Success, episode 385. And in this week's episode, I'm exploring the portfolio career properly, what it actually is, why it's growing so fast, and how to design one that works rather than just ending up with a chaotic stack of commitments. This one is for you if you've always been interested in too many things at once, if you're already working across multiple roles or projects and you want to bring some structure to it, or if you left a single employer career and you're still figuring out what your new model looks like. Enjoy. Welcome to Reimagining Success, the podcast that helps you build a profitable business as an independent expert, one that works for you and your lifestyle. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg, former corporate insider turned business mentor, executive coach, and mum of two. Whether you're a solopreneur, a coach, speaker, consultant, I'm here to guide you in creating a business that gives you freedom, flexibility, and the fulfillment you're looking for. Ready to redefine success and build a business that you love? Let's get started. Okay, so if you search Anna Lundberg portfolio career, which I just did, AI tells you that Anna Lundberg has a portfolio career. So I was actually looking for an article I wrote a long time ago, 10 years ago, in fact, I think it was. But yes, interestingly and amusingly, after 10 years plus of building this way, it's really great to actually see that it's finally been recognized as a real thing. And AI, Google, Gemini, whatever it is who answered me, recognizing that that is what I do. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to go deep on what a portfolio career actually is, why it's rising so fast, and how to design one that works rather than just kind of surviving a random stack of commitments, which, let's face it, can just become hugely complex and overwhelming. So my story, I suppose, I wrote about this in 2016. And at the time, I guess it was quite a niche concept. I don't know. It's certainly been quiet for a few years. And now suddenly people are sprouting up and talking about it. There's some amazing people. Anna Mack, who I think is based in Australia, has got an amazing portfolio career operating system concept she's doing down there. I've seen more and more people. We've talked about generalists. I had Julie on many months ago. And I was on her podcast, in fact, and we talked about portfolio career and generalists. Another one of my articles that was a more successful article over the years was, in fact, exactly that, the curse of the generalist. And so these concepts are all kind of intertwined. And being multi-passionate, multi-potentialite, as Emily Wapnick called it back in the day, she had a very pioneering TED talk on, I think, something like why it's okay not to have a calling or something like that, and built a whole world around that as well. So I guess my own experience of this was, and this is a bit of a humble brag, but at school I was kind of good at everything, interested in everything, and I never had this one thing. I met a girl when I first moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and she had always wanted to be a dancer, and that was her thing. And she ended up kind of living in a squat, and she cared so much that she wasn't focused all about money, for example. And there are others who are like, no, I really want to go and make millions here, or go into finance, or whatever it is, politics, right? I did the International Baccalaureate instead of A-levels, which actually helped me keep my options open, because the IB, you do 6 subjects plus some other stuff, kind of philosophical things and all sorts. Similarly, I'm embarrassed to say, at university, I did philosophy, politics and economics because it gave me the breadth. I continued then to do a master's. I am an ENTP, if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, which again is very versatile, broad array of interests, difficult to zero in on one thing. I'm also a Libra, if we're going to count astrology, which is sort of being indecisive. So that doesn't really help. So the dark side of all this is that it can look quite confused, unfocused, uncommitted, right? And internally, it can feel like imposter syndrome because you're always dabbling rather than going deep in one lane. And I certainly had that with sports, for example. I enjoyed all the sports, so I was never good at anything. Musical instruments, I did like grade 1, piano, grade 5, clarinet. I play ukulele now a little bit. I wanted to learn guitar, etc., right? So you can hear and maybe recognize yourself in this as well. Marketing, similarly, in fact, was quite a clever accidental fit because it was both creative and technical. And especially when I specialised in digital, I got to sit between kind of the more creative marketing side and the more techie side. And that really, really suited me. I got to wear lots of different hats. And obviously, now working for myself, I have even more hats and even more range. So I think what's important and what we realise as generalists, multi-potentialites, whatever we want to call ourselves with a portfolio career, is that what looks like an inability to commit is in fact the earliest version of a portfolio career in the making. We just didn't have a name for it. So I suppose a simple definition is building your professional life from multiple income streams instead of a single full-time job. So if you can imagine a few concrete examples, just so you can visualize it if you are new to the concept, let's say a fractional CMO plus 2 non-exec director roles, coaching plus facilitation, plus writing, plus a part-time employed role, maybe even consulting and speaking, plus maybe you run a small online community, or a part-time job plus a side business plus a board seat, right? There's a 2024 survey I found that said over 40% of professionals under 35 earn from multiple jobs. UK Department for Education research says that 63% of adults either already have multiple roles or plan to, and portfolio careers are up 37% since pre-pandemic. So this is no longer a niche lifestyle choice. It's really the direction of travel. And let's look at then why it's rising. I think there's, as ever, pull factors and push factors, and there's a bigger cultural shift. So in terms of the pull factors, we actively want flexibility, variety, autonomy more than we want a single employer identity. So in one UK study, 22% cited wanting something different and 70% wanting to retrain as drivers. And tech and remote work, of course, have made it practically viable in a way it wasn't before. So I think that's the pull side of things. Then on the push side, post layoffs, burnout, restructuring. A lot of us, I think, start a portfolio by accident. You lose a job, you pick up a contract, you add something else, and then you realize you can intentionally upgrade the patchwork into more of a coherent, intentional design. So those are the push factors. And then a bit more broadly, I suppose, there is a cultural shift. The single ladder, I really love the squiggly careers I've talked about before, Helen Tupper. Sarah, sorry, I can't remember her last name. I always think of Helen for some reason, so apologies, Sarah. The single ladder, the single employer, single identity model is losing its grip. The success scripts are really being rewritten. And, this connects directly back to last week's episode and the one before that when I was talking about women opting out and that whole conversation, right? Because what we're actually opting into often ends up being more of a portfolio because it gives us more variety, flexibility, and fulfillment. Okay, so I guess the challenges of having a portfolio, before I even go into more about it, I suppose, is that it can be genuinely hard. And this is very much speaking from personal experience because context switching is cognitively expensive, right? You're moving between different client worlds, different problems, different relationships, and that takes more out of you than just staying in one lane and always delivering the same thing. On the other hand, of course, it keeps it interesting, right? So that's the pros and cons. Admin overhead can be quite heavy with multiple contracts, multiple invoices, multiple relationships to maintain. Let's be honest, even with multiple streams, you can still have lumpy months. It can still be a bit of feast or famine roller coaster. As ever, we don't get benefits and employer pension contributions, sick pay, etc., unless part of that portfolio is a more stable actual employment. And you can potentially feel a bit isolated. I suppose, like, let's say my playing lots of sports, I never became like a skier or a surfer. I didn't have that one identity. You're always a bit of an imposter in each of those and you don't really belong anywhere. So you can potentially feel a bit isolated. The good news is that there's so many of us with portfolio careers, so we can identify in that way too. But it can be very hard, right? That I just want to be honest about that. There is also the burnout trap, which, to be honest, is always looming large because people assume that portfolio means more freedom, but it can also mean more chaos, right? If you're simply stacking roles without dropping anything, adding more, then you're not making space. You're just creating a really heavy multiple job scenario for you. So you have to ask, okay, what do I need to stop doing to make space for this other thing? And then thinking about your energy, I suppose, how much can you realistically hold within your actual life? Okay, because again, if you only got the 4 or 5 hours every day, then that maths becomes really useful again. You've got a fixed number of hours. Portfolio career doesn't create more of them. It actually requires more different things, business development in multiple areas, marketing on multiple channels potentially. So you need to really think carefully about how you're using your time effectively, depending on what your immediate priority is, if it's money right away, or if it's balance, or what the biggest need for you is. So a portfolio career is not having 3 jobs because your employer underpays you. That's kind of an economic necessity, really, rather than intentional design. A genuine portfolio career has to be a deliberate choice with deliberate architecture. But let's look at the positive instead. Why is now a good time? Well, the economic case has strengthened, I'd say, recently. So I've mentioned this, but fractional executive demand is up 46% year on year in 2024. Companies are definitely increasingly willing to pay for expertise in slices rather than full-time headcount. Ironically, when redundancies are made, actually there's more opportunities for you as an independent expert to come in. And the gig economy has matured. There's so much more infrastructure, more acceptance of it as a valid career choice, and more tools available. But I say gig economy there. I should distinguish between what I'm talking about here and the gig economy in its worst form, I suppose. 0 hours contracts, delivery type of platform dependency. Because a portfolio career is really an expert deliberately diversifying. It's not a worker who's being casualized by someone else's business model, and that is really important in terms of our agency and positioning. So if you don't want it to become just multiple full-time jobs, which is not going to be a solution for anyone, it's really important to consider what's your big messages, what's your coherent umbrella. So in my case, redefining success, redefining how we work and lead, and then that can be translated into working inside companies, and it can be translated into supporting people outside companies, right? So it needs to at least make sense to you. And the more it makes sense, the easier it'll be to have a coherent LinkedIn profile, to be able to speak cohesively and confidently at a networking event or anything like that. And you might also consider having different parts of your work having a different purpose. So you can have kind of an anchor that's your main reliable income stream. Probably that's going to be more like consulting, a fractional role, stable part-time employment. It pays the bills, it gives you a foundation to build from, and you kind of need that to be working before you add layers on, right? Then maybe you would look at where you want to be in a few years' time. Okay, this is more visibility and future income. So, okay, podcast, book, developing IP, strategic advisory. They may not pay well now, but they're going to be the source of growth and take you into the direction that you want to go in the future. So, publishing a book, as I was just talking to someone the other day, is not like, ta-da, now you've made it and the money will flow in. But having that is a massive, it's a business card, it's a credibility piece, and a huge play for future work, right? And then possibly there's a layer. So you've got kind of the anchor, you've got the future growth where you want to take it, and there is more of a passion impact layer, right? So maybe more creative work that you want to do, or volunteering, being on non-profit board, mentoring, or some early experiments. It's not going to be the dominant stream for you, but it feeds you in a way that maybe your most reliable income stream doesn't, from a creative perspective, right? And it's really important to make this sustainable, enjoyable, but it can't dominate because it's not necessarily bringing in the income. So really, I'm all about intentional business design, and especially with this kind of portfolio, it has to be designed, not just haphazardly accumulated. Because again, if you end up with kind of a random stack of commitments and you're not intentionally choosing what's there, if you're just saying yes to everything, then that can become pretty unsustainable in the long term. I suppose a few final things in terms of, I guess, how to start or how to tidy up your portfolio with that in mind. First is kind of auditing what you already have, right? So if you've already got different income streams and commitments, try to label them. Is this kind of an anchor? Is this bringing in the income stability? What is it bringing? Is this the future growth piece? Or is this kind of a passion thing that needs to be there but isn't going to dominate immediately because it doesn't yet bring in the income, right? And be really honest about which is an anchor, growth, or passion layer. Some things people call growth may just be passion, right? And it's not bringing in the income, for example. And it's just important to be clear. It may be something that's not your passion, but does bring in a lot of income. And for now, that's really important. So we do maintain that. Again, it's moving away from the binary choices that's so important. And then decide what to drop. This is so important because a portfolio can only work within a humane number of hours. So what needs to go or shrink to make space for what you're adding? Okay, that's so important. I'm saying that to myself too, because it's so easy to add things on. So audit what you have, decide what to drop, and then a big piece of this. So we talk about mindset, but it's really the shift in your identity. It's not I have a job. It's I have a portfolio career. I am the CEO of this portfolio. I know it sounds fluffy, but it really shifts how you introduce yourself. I'm not like, oh, I did a bit of coaching, I did a bit of this. No, I am an expert in this. I do a few different things. I do this, I have this book, and I do speaking and whatever, right? So it's how you introduce yourself. It's also how you structure your week to support that portfolio model, and how you make decisions. All of that changes when you stop seeing yourself as someone who is in a job or who's just kind of dabbling and experimenting versus, no, this is a container that I'm designing deliberately. So you can consider having, theme days to reduce context switching, separate finances for different streams if the volume justifies it and if that helps. And then obviously really clear contracts and scope on different engagements. I think portfolio careers especially can live or die on boundaries. So, this is personally very relevant to me. Again, talk about that article I wrote 10 years ago, my Myers-Briggs profile, that feeling of always being pulled in different directions. But I want us to see this as a strength. It's just a different operating system, right? In fact, it's not better, it's not worse than being a specialist. It's just different, and it suits some of us more than others. And it turns out there is a growing infrastructure for people who build this way. So communities, frameworks, tools, role models. I mentioned again Emily Wapnick's TEDx talk on why some of us don't have one true calling. That's great to watch if you're new to this idea. Again, my first book, Leaving the Corporate 9-to-5, that introduced different alternatives to the corporate 9-to-5, including a whole section on portfolio careers. So the question is not what's wrong with me? Why can't I pick just one thing? It's how do I design a portfolio that plays to how I actually work, okay? So if you are trying to figure that out, I'd love to hear from you and hear what you're thinking. You can always book a free call at onestepoutside.com/call. Just have a chat about how you're thinking, whether you're starting out or whether you're further along and you're just wanting to bring that extra layer of intentional design to what you're working on. But I hope, and I know that more and more of us are seeing the light when it comes to this portfolio way of working, and it can only be a good thing that we're finding ways to work for us in terms of the freedom and flexibility, as well as doing more fulfilling work in a way that works for us. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. Bye for now. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to hit the button now. You'll get a new episode every Monday, and I'd love for this to become part of your week. And if you've been listening for a while and haven't left a review yet, I would be so grateful if you could leave even a couple of lines. It makes a real difference to how many people find the show.